Now live, this is Football at 4.
Josh Hennick filling in for Mike Gill on a Monday edition on 97.3 ESPN. Pinch hitting for Jeff Mosher today. It's Adam Caplan here on a Monday edition of Football at 4. Of course, Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, Inside the Birds on YouTube, Inside the Birds on Patreon, and wherever you get your podcasts. It's draft week. And Adam Caplan joined with the latest information as well as some thoughts on Cam Jurgens' 4-year contract extension. He is now signed through 2029. And Adam, that means 4 of the Eagles' 5 offensive linemen are all signed through at least 2027.
Hey, Josh, this gives them certainty about what their offensive line will look like. Not that they didn't know Jurgens was going to be here for a while. They made a decision at the end of last season he was going to be extended. There was no hard deadline. Plus, he had back surgery. But as someone who is in contact with him a lot lately told us, he was expecting to get it done relatively soon. They got it done now. I give the Eagles credit. Look, they could have waited until training camp, around there before training camp started, just to make sure his rehab was going well. Well, guess what? Rehab's going pretty well. They did not need to wait 4 more months. So they felt pretty good about it. They get it done now. Now, he becomes, by average per season, Josh, he becomes the second highest paid center in the National Football League. We have not gotten the full breakdown. We'll get that over the weekend in terms of what the guarantee looks like. But the bottom line is that this goes back several decades on how Joe Banner, the former Eagles president, did things. He, as soon as they were allowed to extend a player who they liked, they would do it. And then the Joe Banner rule came in where, because you might remember, Josh, the Eagles would have to wait by the old rule a couple CBAs ago. They'd have to wait until after 2 seasons. Now you have to wait till 3. And that's what the Eagles did here. They waited till after his 3rd year. He has now 1 year plus 4 left. And you're right, Josh, they're going to have these guys sign up for a number of years. And it's pretty remarkable to me. They just continue to get this thing done, man. It's super cool. And this is what they do. I mean, I'm very impressed with the way how he's done this. And he also is on the way of they clearly have gotten him right so far. One thing I do want to say with Cam Jurgens is he did have a bad injury history at Nebraska. That he had foot problems. We reported at the time that he was drafted. He's had some injuries here, but he plays through it. I remember talking to Jack Stoll, a former Eagles tight end, who's now with New Orleans. Jack said he's really smart. He was his roommate in college for a bit, and Jurgens has been a really good football player, and this is just yet another offensive lineman, Josh, that the Eagles have gotten right.
And to that point, because you mentioned at the beginning there, he had the back surgery this offseason to deal with the pinched nerve. And, a lot of people online are reacting, oh, what about the back surgery? And, Adam, sure. I think it's safe to assume that the Eagles are not making a contract decision. This is like the 76ers just throwing out money at people. The Eagles are going to cross all their T's and dot their I's before they give Jurgens this money.
Exactly. So that's the thing, Josh. And the thing is, he's their player. They know how he's been rehabbing. They know he had the surgery, out west. But they knew what they were dealing with. It's no different than any player that has had surgery. They kind of know. Landon Dickerson with the knee. They know what's expected. They know when he's going to be back. Now, I would tell you that one thing that offensive line coaches have told me over the years, they're always concerned when a offensive lineman has back surgery. Something you have to keep an eye on. Jordan Mailata, by the way, had significant back problems early in his career, which he's gotten over. So, yeah, you have to take a look at it. But the Eagles, again, they've done very well with rehabbing their players, and it's been a pretty good marriage. And by the way, Jason Kelsey, as you know, was involved, Josh. It was Howie Roseman's call, but Jason was involved in the tape study and the recommendation to draft Jurgens, because Howie does this with a lot of former players he respects. Brent Selleck, Darren Sproles, and others. He asked them to get involved, and Kelsey did, and by the way, he was right.
Absolutely. And Adam, before we move on from this, can you explain to the audience, because for those who don't know, Adam is more than just Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, but you've been an NFL insider for years. Explain to the audience about what other NFL teams are noticing about what the Eagles are doing with these contract extensions.
Yeah, this is interesting. So this comes up every now and then when Jeff and I ask more often than front offices about this. Not so many coaches. Coaches don't really understand contracts, and they really admire the way the Eagles do business because Howie learned from Joe Banner, and Howie's been so bullish. Once they identify a guy that it's working, they extend early. There are not a lot of teams that do this. It's very strange, Josh. I don't know what the big risk is. If you're right on it's very rare when the Eagles are wrong on extending a player early. Look, the Carson Wentz thing, Josh. I couldn't blame them for doing it. Yes, he had an injury history. Now their relationship with Carson obviously went south. They didn't know that would happen. I mean, you could say they got that one wrong. That's fine, because in the end they had to trade him because he wanted out and they felt compelled to trade him. But more often than not, Josh, they have a very high percentage of being right, and it's come up in conversations that I've had with front office people. They really do admire the way the Eagles do business, and I think Howie's relationships with other teams have been much better in recent years. He's not always trying to get over on teams where he try to always win the trade. I'm sure you're aware of that. Howie's talked about that in interviews. He's done a much better job. So, in the end, Josh, the Eagles do really good business. They make very smart bets. They're rarely wrong. It's quite frankly, it's when they've done restructures, they've had a couple bad ones over the years. But overall, they extend the players at the right time, and they do it early. And this is what Joe Banner did. The only player, though, by the way, before we move on, the one guy who turned them down, you're old enough to remember Michael Lewis, who was a safety, who wound up signing with the Niners. That was a stunner. I think in 2006, maybe 2005, where he just decided, you know what, I'm going to bet on myself. And he wound up getting a pretty good contract with the Niners, good free agent contract. But it's very rare, other than Milton Williams. By the way, the Eagles tried to re-sign him. They really tried hard in the regular season, and I got to give Milton credit. He did a smart thing by not re-signing. He got a major deal with the Patriots.
Talking with Adam Caplan from Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, at Caplan NFL on the Twitter X platform. Of course, the latest edition is the mock draft with Adam, Andrew DeCecco, and Jeff Mosher that dropped this morning. But speaking of the draft, Adam, the Eagles and their athletic testing RAS scores. First of all, explain to the audience, what is an RAS score and how much does that involve in the Eagles' decision-making?
It is big. But it's all right. So basically, Josh, it's called Relative Athletic Score. It basically takes measurables, height, weight, relative speed, 40-yard dash, 10-yard split, 20-yard split, broad jump, vertical. They take a lot of measurables and it's put into a score. And we've known about this, but we had not done a study because we noticed the trend, and Jeff and I looked it up, and we asked around the league. And the Eagles aren't the only team that does this. A lot of teams do it, but the Eagles, because of analytics, they take this majorly into account. And Quinyon Mitchell, high RAS scores. So just so you know, anything in the nines is considered high. 9.5 or higher is exceptional. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, exceptional. Jalen Hunt, exceptional. Will Shipley, very good. Jalen Carter, exceptional. I mean, you could go. Keely Ringo, pretty good for his size at that position. Jordan Davis, exceptional for his size. Jurgens, really good. In fact, there are only a few that were not good. Like Kenny Gainwell's was really low. That's why he dropped to the fifth round. Now, the coaches really pushed Howie to draft him. And that, by the way, they got that one right in terms of drafting. Devontae Smith was pretty good. So bottom line is these athletic scores mean a lot to them. Because what will happen is, Josh, and I think Rick Spielman told us something. Rick Spielman, the former Vikings GM, when they signed Adam Thielen as an undrafted free agent, he was really not a guy that they identified despite playing at Mankato State in Minneapolis. What happened was they were looking for guys who had great athletic testing, certain data points. Thielen, though he's not really recognized as fast, he had good short area quickness. Their analytics department found him, and without that, they probably would have never signed him. So analytical data, and you got to give the Eagles credit. Alec Halaby, who's their assistant general manager, since 21, one of the reasons why Howie Roseman is drafted so much better than he did before that is they're hitting a lot on these athletic benchmarks. Now, do they miss some players? Sure. I'll give you one. Last year, Dylan McMahon, who was their last pick, he was 6th-round pick, 190 overall. His he was in the 9.8, 9.9 grade. But as Andrew Duchecko and I could tell you, he was so small. I remember seeing him at training camp, Josh. I thought he was a fullback. I didn't know he was. I was shocked that he was actually a guard center, and he didn't work out. He was overdrafted. I mean, not overdrafted. He shouldn't have been drafted. He's too small. But I got to give Howie credit. It's not just tape is always number one, to be clear, but athletic testing is taken largely into account. That's another deciding factor for the Eagles.
Now, it's a deciding factor, but as we know, the Eagles have a lot of factors in. So are there circumstances, whether it would be in past drafts or maybe in this year's draft, where maybe not a literal player, but like a situation where maybe they would say, I understand the RAS score is whatever it is, but
Sure.
There's another factor that we are going to evaluate in this particular position or player?
Correct. So I think when Josh got things wrong. Let's go back to Andre Dillard, because it's been a week ago. Jalen Rager's actually scores were very good, but let's get to Andre Dillard, right? Not a great athlete, not bad at all. He had short arms, right, way short arms than you want for the draft. He was under 34. That's just not good enough. And the tape was inconsistent, but there was some decent athleticism from tape. But he wasn't powerful enough, and it showed. So there are exceptions. I mentioned Kenny Gainwell. That was strictly because the coaches got involved. Sirianni loved him. We reported this at the time, and Howie liked that he can catch the ball really well. Again, not really great athletically at all. The athletic testing was not very good. You could say they overlooked it. No question about that. It just look. They've done some things sometimes where you scratch your head. Kevon Wallace is not a great athlete. You might remember Kevon Wallace, who it really never worked out. So yeah, there are exceptions. And by the way, I'll give you now. This is before Howie was the general manager. Brent Selleck, former Eagles tight end, won a Super Bowl with him. He did not run a good 40. His athletic testing was not very good, but they loved his tape. And that's what you got to do. You can't just be married to athletic numbers. Tape has always been number one for every NFL team. And yes, you take some other stuff into account. You got to be careful because remember, I'll give you one more before we get out of here. There was a first-round pick, Jerry Tillery. Okay, the Eagles liked him. So he's still in the league. He's still with the team. He went to Notre Dame. His athletic testing numbers were fantastic. Tape inconsistent, motor inconsistent, hard to coach sometimes, and he's been a journeyman. So again, this is why tape and background information is so important. And we talk about this. You talk about the mock draft. Andrew and I and Jeff did today. Part of why we drafted certain in this mock, why we selected certain players is because of the background. A lot of things play into it with NFL teams. That's the way we try to make that that mock draft today.
And I also encourage folks, go to Inside the Birds, whether you get your podcasting platform or on YouTube, because for those who don't fully understand, when you have that series with Sam Finkel, he does a great job at kind of giving the audience who maybe is not as well versed as guys like you and Jeff are about the analytics. He gives a better insight about how NFL teams use those analytic numbers.
Oh, yeah, we just dropped one. Yeah, Sam Finkel's phenomenal. People love this stuff. He takes a lot of things to account, all the data, and you will find players, teams will find players late in the draft that maybe their tape wasn't great, but their athletic testing is great. So check those out, yes, on all our podcasting platforms, on YouTube, and obviously in podcasting platforms, yeah. And then, by the way, our last intel with Greg Cosell drops tomorrow. Tackles and guards tomorrow, only on Inside the Birds.
Absolutely love it. Adam, great stuff today. Catch you next time.
Thank you.